"Don't you dare walk out that door, Evie." Her father's voice cracked through the chilly morning air, sharp as the frost crusting the windows, but the door had already slammed shut. 10-year-old Evie. Dalton's boots crunched into the icy porch steps as she pulled her coat tighter around her small frame. Her breath fogged in the cold, matching the weight inside her chest. The old farmhouse stood silent behind her, like it always did when her father lost himself in another spiral. It had been getting worse since Mom passed, and that morning, like so many others, breakfast had turned into a battlefield over nothing, over how she sliced the bread, how she fed the chickens, how she dared to hum her mother's lullaby. She sniffed and wiped her nose with the sleeve of her jacket. Her plan was simple: walk to the edge of the field behind their house, sit under the elm tree like she used to with her mother, and wait until the anger faded, hers and maybe his too. But she stopped in her tracks before she even made it past the front step. There, huddled in the far corner of the porch where the wood met the snow, was a dog, a German shepherd, trembling so hard her ribs visibly shook beneath her thin dirt-matted fur. One ear was flopped over, the other scarred at the tip. She wasn't just cold. She looked ruined, the kind of ruin that comes from too many nights alone and too many things seen that couldn't be unseen. Evie's heart lurched. "Hey," she whispered, slowly lowering herself to her knees, careful not to spook her. "Where'd you come from?" The dog's eyes lifted to meet hers, brown, wet, wide, and held them like they'd known each other before. Evie reached out, inch by inch, hand trembling in the cold. The dog didn't flinch. She just watched. "Okay," Evie murmured, fingers gently grazing her collar. "Let's see who you belong to." It wasn't just a collar. It was a thick, old leather strap with a rusted buckle, like something made by hand. But what stopped Evie cold was the tag hanging from it, not shiny metal, but a piece of folded, water-stained paper tucked into a plastic pouch. She pulled it out with numb fingers and opened it. Her breath caught Dot in shaky handwriting. It read, "If you find her, please don't bring her back. She's safer far from home." Evie read it again, then a third time, her chest tightening each time the words settled deeper. What kind of person sends a dog into the snow and tells strangers to keep her? What kind of danger was this animal, running from safer far from home? She repeated softly. The dog looked at her, almost like she understood, like she agreed. Evie's hands trembled as she crumpled the paper and shoved it in her coat pocket. "You can't stay out here," she whispered. "You'll die." With slow movements she backed toward the door. "Come on. It's warmer inside." The dog hesitated. Then, as though trusting her completely, she stood on shaking legs and limped forward, one paw barely touching the ground. Evie pushed open the door and held it wide. Her father's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Evie, you got 10 seconds too." She slammed the door behind her before he could finish. The dog followed her into the mudroom, then hesitated again. Evie grabbed a towel from the hook and started rubbing her gently, trying to soak up the snow from her fur. Her hands ran over old scars, one along her ribcage, another on the back leg. This dog had been through something ugly, something that made Evie's stomach twist. The sound of boots thudding toward them made her jump. Her father rounded the corner. "What the hell is that?" Evie stood tall. She was freezing on the porch. "I couldn't leave her there." "You don't bring strays into this house," he growled, his face already red. "You want fleas, rabies. What if she bites?" "She won't." Evie's voice didn't shake this time. "She's hurt." He looked like he might explode, but something in the way the dog stared at him and blinking.com, yet ready, made him hesitate. He grunted and turned away. "You're cleaning up whatever mess she makes." He snapped over his shoulder, disappearing down the hall. Evie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked down at the dog. "Guess you're my mess now." The dog blinked slowly, then sat, leaning against Evie's leg. That night, while her father drank himself to sleep in the living room, Evie sat on the floor beside her bed, the dog curled at her feet. She'd brought an old blanket and a bowl of leftover stew she'd warmed up without asking. The dog hadn't made a sound, just ate quietly, and then laid down with her head resting on Evie's slippers. Evie whispered into the stillness, "What happened to you?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled a note out again. The same 3 lines, no phone number, no name beyond the mysterious elf. She flipped it over. Nothing. But now that she looked closer, the ink had bled in one corner, and something faint appeared beneath it, almost like a second layer of writing, barely visible under the top message. A fingerprint smudge, maybe no more like letters. Hidden. Evie's eyes narrowed. Wait. She carefully held the paper under her desk lamp and tilted it. Slowly, in a different angle of light, she saw something shimmer faintly beneath. The top line of ink, a single word. "Run." Her blood turned to ice. She looked at the dog. The dog looked back. And for the first time that day, Evie wasn't just scared of what had happened to the dog, she was scared of who might come looking for her. Evie barely slept that night. The note haunted her, the single word hidden beneath. The surface run flickered in her mind like a warning whispered through a dream. She kept waking up in the dark, turning over to make sure the dog was still there, still breathing, still safe. Each time, the German shepherd whom she'd quietly begun calling Willow remained curled by the foot of her bed, ears twitching, At every creak in the old farmhouse. By morning, a thin layer of snow coated the windows and the house was still cold with silence. Her father had left early, judging by the absence of his truck and the cigarette smoke that usually lingered in the kitchen. Evie didn't know where he went most days anymore. He was always chasing a job or avoiding a memory, depending on which version of him woke up that morning. She slid from bed, her feet stiff from the cold floor, and quietly set down a bowl of leftover oatmeal for Willow, who sniffed it politely before eating. Evie ran her fingers through the dog's fur as she chewed, discovering a second, smaller tag hidden behind the collar. It was smooth, almost like it had been rubbed clean over time. She turned it around. There, etched faintly in the metal, was a name. Juna. The word felt strange in her mouth. Not Willow then. Yuna. It felt right. Evie whispered it again, softly, as though the sound might carry some meaning back to the dog. Yuna's ears perked slightly, just enough to let Evie know she'd heard. Later that morning, as Evie sat at the kitchen table with Yuna at her feet, she took the note from her pocket one last time and stared at the name scrawled at the bottom. That letter, the hidden message, the scars on Yuna's body, they weren't random. Someone had sent her here on purpose. Someone who'd wanted her found, but not returned. She knew there was only one place in town that might give her answers. The feed store down by Old Mill Road. The owner, Harriet Finch, was in her 60s, with a deep memory and deeper secrets. She used to breed working dogs when Evie was little and still spoke to her mother when they shopped for chicken feed. If anyone knew where a dog like Yuna came from, it would be her. Evie zipped up her coat, packed a peanut butter sandwich into her school bag, and stuffed the note in with it. Yuna followed without needing a word. She limped, but less than the day before. It was almost like being indoors had helped her heal faster, like she knew she was finally somewhere safe. The walk was long. Icy wind nipped at Evie's face, and her boots filled with snow with every step. Juna padded silently beside her, eyes scanning every passing truck, every fluttering bird. She didn't bark, she didn't growl. She just watched, always watching. When they reached the feed store, the old bell above the door rang out like a cracked church bell. Harriet looked up from behind the counter and adjusted her glasses. "Where I'll be," she muttered, stepping out from behind the register. "That dog, where did you find her?" Evie froze. "You know her?" Harriet didn't answer right away. She kneeled slowly, hands out, palms open. Yuna stood completely still. Then, as if recognizing a long-lost friend, she walked forward and rested her head against Harriet's leg. "I knew her," Harriet said quietly. 3 years ago. Her name was Juna. She was raised on the Nolan property. Smartest girl I'd ever seen. She could track a scent across a flooded creek. "What happened to her?" Evie asked, voice tight. Harriet looked up. Her expression had changed, like a wall had gone up behind her eyes. "The Nolans stopped coming around town last winter. People whispered things, family trouble, strange visitors. Then one day the kennels were just empty. All 6 dogs gone. Yuna was the only one anyone ever saw again." Evie pulled out the note and laid it on the counter. Harriet read it once, then her lips pressed into a hard line. She didn't comment on the message, just said, "That handwriting looks like Lena Nolan's, the daughter." "Do you know where she went?" Evie asked. "She left right after the fires. Drove out one night and never came back. No one's sure where she landed." Harriet's voice grew quiet. "But that girl loved those dogs more than she loved her own life. If she sent Yuna away, she had a reason." A loud bang snapped their heads toward the window. A dark green truck had pulled up fast, wheels spinning over gravel. The engine idled aggressively. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a long coat and gloves to clean for someone in the country. His eyes swept the storefront like he was hunting for something. Harriet moved fast. "That's not someone from around here." Evie's breath caught in her throat. Yuna backed into the store, fur bristling, eyes locked on the man through the window. "Take her out the back door," Harriet whispered urgently. "Now, but no time. That man's looking for her, and if Lena's warning meant anything, it means you keep running." Evie didn't hesitate. She grabbed Yuna's collar and ducked behind the bags of feed. Harriet pulled open the back door and shoved a wool blanket into Evie's hands. "Go through the alley, cut behind the church, and don't stop." Evie burst into the cold with Yuna close beside her, the sound of the bell jingling behind them as the front door opened. A deep voice called out, "You've seen a German shepherd come through here," but it was quickly muffled by the door slamming shut again. They didn't look back. Snow began falling in slow, heavy flakes as they ran, the alley echoing with their breath and footsteps. Every twist in the path felt like another door closing. Behind them, Evie didn't know where they were going, but she knew one thing now beyond all doubt. Whoever sent Yuna away hadn't just been trying to save the dog, they were trying to protect whoever found her. And Evie had just stepped into a story far bigger and far darker than she ever imagined. Evie's lungs burned as she ran, her boots slipping over frozen patches in the alley, Yuna's paws thudding beside her in quiet urgency. The cold bit through the wool blanket clutched to her chest, but she didn't dare stop. Not after what Harriet had said. Not after the look in Yuna's eyes when that truck pulled up like something ancient and terrible had just sniffed out their hiding place. They reached the back of the church, just as the first bell began to ring for midday prayers. Evie ducked behind a low brick wall near the side entrance and crouched, gasping for breath. Yuna lay beside her, pressed tight against her leg, her ears up, listening. That truck, that man, whoever he was, he hadn't come by accident. He was tracking maybe even her. Evie's hand shook as she pulled out the note again. She stared at the words like they might rearrange themselves and give her answers. She's safer far from home. And hidden underneath. Run. But run from what? What could make someone abandon a dog like Juno with no intention of reclaiming her? She took out the metal tag again and stared at the name Una. Harriet had said she was one of 6 dogs, only one ever seen again. That meant the others had vanished, or worse. Her chest tightened with fear and something else, grief maybe, for a family she never met. For a girl named Lena Nolan who had loved her dogs enough to give them away one by one. A slow crunch of gravel snapped her out of her thoughts. Across the street, the dark green truck cruised by slowly, its windows tinted too dark to see through. It passed the church, slowed near the corner, then rolled out of sight. Evie waited 10 seconds. 20. She peeked around the wall. Empty. They couldn't go back to the farmhouse. That much was clear. Her dad would never believe her, and worse, he might hand Una over just to get rid of the trouble. Harriet couldn't help them now, not after what she risked. Evie pulled her coat tighter and whispered, "We need to find Lena." Juna didn't move, but her eyes met Evie's with quiet understanding, the kind of look no ordinary dog should give. They didn't have money. They didn't have a phone. But Evie remembered something: an old community board outside the library where people used to post services, garage sales, missing pets. If Lena had lived in town before she vanished, maybe there was a thread left behind. The library was 2 miles south, past the edge of town. Evie had only walked there twice with her mum before the cancer took her. That had been nearly a year ago. The snow was falling heavier now, blanketing everything in soft white, muting sound and smoothing footprints. It made it easier to hide, but also easier to get lost. They walked the long way, cutting through backyards, avoiding sidewalks. Juna moved slower than before, her limp more pronounced, but she didn't stop, not once, as if she knew where they were going, as if something inside her had snapped into focus again. When they reached the library, it was nearly empty. The wind had picked up, pushing snow across the front steps in spirals. The old oak bulletin board stood by the door, shielded by a crooked plastic canopy. Evie scanned it quickly: flyers for piano lessons, firewood deliveries, lost mittens. Then, tucked behind a notice for a town hall meeting, she saw a faded flyer. It was old, the corners curled, but there was no mistaking the face. A young woman, maybe 18, smiling under a hood, her arms wrapped around a German shepherd that could only be Una only. This version of her was younger, fuller, untouched by whatever she had endured. Lena Nolan, last seen January 14th. If you have information, call 907-555-8132 VIE. Wrote the number down on her hand with a dull pencil from the front desk. It had to still work. It had to lead somewhere. But they needed a phone. There was one payphone left in town, near the diner. She hadn't used it since 2nd grade, when her mum let her call Grandma on her birthday, but it still stood by the rusted bike rack, barely visible through the snowfall. They slipped behind the library and headed there, cutting between buildings, keeping low. No sign of the green truck. No sign of anyone, really. Evie picked up the receiver and fed in the last of her lunch money, hand shaking. The line rang twice, then again, then a 4th time. Her heart sank, but just as she was about to hang up, a voice answered. Hello. It was a woman's voice, soft, guarded. Evie took a deep breath. Hi, I found a dog, a German shepherd. I think her name is Juna. Silence. Then, the voice cracked slightly. Where are you? I can't say, it's not safe. Someone came looking for her. Another pause. Then the woman spoke with urgency, but no panic. Is she okay? Is she hurt? She's alive, Evie said, but scared, and someone dangerous is trying to take her. Listen to me, the voice said. You did the right thing, but you need to keep moving. Do you know where Silver Hollow is? Evie blinked. That's up near the lake. Yes, there's an old ranger's cabin west side, 2 miles into the trees. Go tonight. I'll meet you there at first light. The line went dead. Evie stood there, frozen. Juna looked up at her, ears twitching like she'd heard every word. Silver Hollow, the forest, the old cabin. They had to go into the woods. As they turned toward the edge of town, the wind picked up behind them, scattering snow into the air like ghosts swirling on the breeze. And somewhere in the distance, faint but unmistakable, the deep growl of an engine started up again. The forest swallowed them slowly, like an ancient sleeping beast stirred by the quiet crunch of snow under boots and paws. Evie pulled the wool blanket tighter around her shoulders, her breath forming clouds that vanished into the pine-dark air. Behind her, Juna followed, her movements cautious but steady. The light was fading fast. Twilight in Silver Hollow came, early, and it brought a kind of hush that felt sacred and eerie all at once. They had left town an hour ago, slipping past the last row of shuttered homes, moving uphill through the service path that led toward the west end of the lake. Evie's muscles ached, her socks were damp. The cold was crueler out here, untouched by engines or chimneys or roads, but she didn't complain, she didn't stop. The image of that truck rolling slowly through town, the low growl of its engine like a hunting cat's purr, wouldn't let her rest. She kept thinking about the woman on the phone. Lena, her voice, had cracked when Evie said Yuna's name, but she hadn't panicked. She sounded like someone used to danger, used to hiding. Evie wondered what kind of life that voice had been living all this time, what it had cost Lena to give Juna up and leave behind everything familiar. The wind picked up, rustling the frozen pine needles. Juna paused, ears pricked, then kept moving. She had changed since the first night. Still wary, still silent, but sharper now, more alert, like something dormant in her was waking up again. Evie could feel it, like a hum between them, a growing connection that didn't need words. They found the old ranger cabin just as full dark set in. It sat hunched beneath a cluster of frost-coated trees, its roof sagging under years of snow and silence. The porch creaked under their weight, but the door was unlocked. Evie pushed it, open, half expecting it to collapse or reveal something worse, but inside, it was just cold and empty to tea shelves, a cot with a threadbare blanket, and a Castian stove in the corner. Evie dropped her bag and set to work. She found kindling and matches in a drawer, wrapped in a yellowed trail map. It took her 3 tries to light the fire, her fingers stiff from cold, but when the first flames caught, she felt a rush of fragile hope. Juna curled near the stove, soaking in the warmth, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Evie knelt beside her. She's coming, okay, Lena's coming. Juna didn't move, but her tail gave the smallest thump against the floor. They shared a can of soup heated in a tin mug, and sat in the glow of the fire. Outside, the forest shifted and breathed. The wind howled once through the trees, then died away again. Evie leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling beams. I don't even know what's going on, she said quietly, but I think someone wants to erase you. And Lena and whatever happened back then. Yuna's eyes met hers, steady and deep. Evie pulled the note from her pocket again. She stared at it, turning it over and over in her hands. Something still didn't sit right. The message was clear, yes, but it felt incomplete, like a book missing its final page. She held it up to the firelight, squinting. The back of the paper shimmered faintly. She moved closer to the flame. There beneath the water stains and creases something, faint ink, words, once erased or maybe never fully written. She rubbed gently with her sleeve, warming the paper. Letters emerged slowly, ghost-like. They used the dogs. Then another line, harder to read. Trained for something else, not rescue, not search. Evie's mouth went dry. She read the lines again. Used, trained, not for good. She turned to Juna. What did they do to you? Juna didn't move, but her gaze changed. Something flickered in her eyes. Something wounded and guarded. Before Evie could say more, a sudden creak outside froze her in place. A twig snapped, then another. Juna stood, ears stiff, body taut. Evie held her breath. Footsteps slow, deliberate. She killed the fire in a panic, throwing snow from outside over the embers, plunging the cabin into near darkness. Her hands fumbled for the blanket, draping it over Yuna's back. She crouched behind the cot, barely daring to breathe. A soft knock came at the door, then a voice. Evie. She blinked. It wasn't a man's voice. It was familiar, tired, softer than the trees. Evie, it's Lena. The door creaked open. A flashlight beam cut across the cabin. Then it lowered. Lena Nolan stepped inside. She looked older than the photo, her face thinner, her eyes lined with sleepless years. Her coat was worn and a duffel bag hung from her shoulder. Evie stepped into view slowly. You're real. Lena gave a trembling smile. So are you. Then her eyes dropped to the dog behind Evie. Juna. Yuna walked forward, slow, careful, and pressed her head into Lena's hip. Lena dropped to her knees and buried her face in Yuna's neck, her shoulders shaking. I thought I lost you, she whispered. I thought they got you too. Evie stood back, unsure whether to speak. Lena looked up. You don't know what you've done, do you? Evie swallowed. No, I just found her. And the note. Lena nodded slowly. They were training them, the dogs, for surveillance, border runs, illegal stuff. My dad had ties with someone in the agency off the books. Juna wasn't supposed to survive. None of them were. Evie felt a sick weight settle in her stomach. What happened to the others? Lena's eyes darkened. They turned them on each other. They wanted to see which dogs were more obedient. Juna was the only one who refused to attack. Outside, another twig snapped. Lena grabbed Evie's arm. They tracked me here once, years ago. If they know she's alive. Evie looked to the window. That truck's been following us since town. Lena's jaw clenched. Then we don't have much time. From the shadows outside came the unmistakable click of boots in snow, and then a man's voice. Come out now. Lena, you've got something that doesn't belong to you. Juna growled low, the first sound Evie had heard her make, and in that moment, something shifted. Juna didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a protector. Snow fell in heavy, soundless sheets outside the cabin, blanketing the world in white, as if the forest itself was trying to muffle what was about to happen. Inside, Time slowed. Lena's hand tightened on Evie's arm while her other reached quietly into the duffel bag by the door. Una stood like a statue, her growl now a low vibration running through the wooden floor. Her body blocked the doorway, not just with instinct, but with a bone-deep understanding of who was on the other side. She remembered him. Evie's breath shook in her throat, her heart hammered in her chest, not just from fear, but from the unbearable stillness of knowing the moment was about to rupture. She looked at Lena, who had pulled out a small flare gun and loaded it silently. There was no panic in her face, just the calm of someone who had run out of choices long ago. The man outside spoke again, his voice sharper this time. "Lena, you don't want this to get ugly. I'm only here for the dog. You know what she was built for?" "Built for," Lena murmured, her lip curling slightly. "She's not a machine. She was mine." Evie stepped back as Lena moved closer to the door, pressing her back against the frame and holding the flare gun close to her chest. Una didn't move, eyes locked forward. "Evie," Lena said softly without turning, "when I opened that door, I need you to listen to me. Take Juna and run if I tell you. Head east, there's a road a mile down. Take the trail behind the stream. You'll hit an old ranger outpost. I've got people watching it now." Evie shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." Lena turned to her then, and her eyes tired, tearful, and filled with the raw kind of love that could only come from Losmet Evie's. "You already saved her. That was more than I ever thought possible. Just don't let them take her again before Evie could argue. Lena threw open the door. The wind burst in like a living thing, snow swirling in mad spirals around her. The man stood just 10 feet away, face hidden under a cap and scarf, a gloved hand near his belt. "This ends now," he said. "No," Lena replied, voice firm. "This begins now." She raised the flare gun and fired. The red blaze screamed into the sky, cutting through the dark like a blood-colored comet. The man cursed and stepped back, and then Juna moved. She didn't leap to attack. She surged forward and stood between Lena and the man, body poised, eyes locked onto his. It wasn't rage, it was warning. She was no longer the broken creature who had limped onto a porch. She was the witness, the survivor, the one they hadn't broken. The man reached for something beneath his coat. Evie didn't see what, but he didn't get the chance to use it. A second figure burst from the trees behind him, then another. 2 men in winter gear, badges glinting faintly, surrounded him with practiced speed. "Hands where we can see them." One of them barked. The man froze. Lena exhaled shakily and stepped outside, shoulders collapsing inward as if 1,000 invisible weights had just dropped from her back. Evie didn't understand right away. Then she saw the symbol on one of the officers, Jakitsa Wildlife Task Force, not local police. Federal. Lena turned to her, her voice breaking for the first time. "I've been working with them for months, gathering proof, staying in the shadows, but I needed them to see Juna alive. They wouldn't act without her, without what she remembers." Evie felt the tears come then, uninvited but unstoppable. Not from fear or relief, but from the staggering weight of everything this dog had carried, what she had been turned into, what she had escaped, and how, in the end, it had been a child's act of kindness that saved her. As the man was led away, in handcuffs, Evie knelt down beside Juna. She looked older now, weathered, but there was something glowing behind her eyes, something whole. "You made it," Evie whispered, resting her forehead against hers. "You made it back." Juna didn't bark, she didn't whine. She simply pressed her head into Evie's chest and stayed there. They stayed in the cabin that night. Lena on the cot, Evie curled beside Juna near the warm stove. No one spoke much. The fire cracked gently, and the wind softened outside, as if the forest had decided to rest too. At dawn, they walked to the outpost together. The snow crunched beneath their feet, but it felt different now, like something buried had finally been set free. Evie didn't know what would happen next. Maybe she'd go back to the farmhouse, maybe not. But one thing she knew with absolute certainty: she would never forget the look in Yuna's eyes when they left the trees and stepped into the light. Not everything that's broken stays that way. Some scars are proof that something survived, and sometimes, when the world forgets who you are, a little girl on a cold porch will remember.